Well, good evening, friends. My name is Steve Harden, and I've got a lot of Grady McWhiney stories. I'm a 1989 doc PhD. I went up to TCU in 1985. I didn't know anybody in Fort Worth, and I was bored out of my mind. It was before school had actually started, so I went up to good old Dave Reed Hall to the third floor, and nobody was at home except Dr. McWhiney. I said, Dr. McWhiney, I am bored out of my mind. Do you have anything I can do? And he says, well, as a matter of fact, I do. And he handed me he handed me the manuscript, the typed manuscript of Cracker Culture.
Really?
And he said, proof this.
Do you have anything else I can do?
I was thinking of yard work.
Now then, what he told me he wanted for his funeral. First of all, he didn't want a funeral. He wanted a barbecue. He wanted a pig over some coals. He got that accomplished. Then he wanted fiddle music and a general atmosphere of conviviality where his friends could tell stories about his life. And so,
the very first seminar I took with him was quite advanced. He had some very able graduate students in it, but there was one woman who obviously was a very nice woman, but who simply was in over her head. But at the end of this second seminar, it was obvious to her she was just bewildered by all this. Her eyes were glazing over, and she finally said very directly to Professor McWhiney, she said, you know, Professor McWhiney, this history is wonderful, but she said, this is just so advanced. She said, I teach junior high. She said, I just don't know that I can use much of this with my junior high students. And so she said to him, what should I do? And he looked at her and he said, try not to let the children hurt each other too much. Try not to let the children damage the classroom. If you can keep the students from hurting each other and damaging the classroom, you will have done your job.
the man you're playing for today, quintessential Southern gentleman. And he liked fiddle contests. We used to judge fiddle contests in Alabama. I own his fiddle. It's in my home. He couldn't play it. He just liked the thought of owning one.
That's pretty good.
And so y'all are the fiddle portion of this party. And I think we're in great hands. So,
I hope so.
And he'd have thought you girls were just adorable.
Come dead across.
Yep.
Since that meal was so good, we'll just do a good old Eaton song for you, and this is probably Bob Wills' most famous Eaton song. It's called Roly Poly.
Well, you know, I remember our trip to Shiloh, and there was a restaurant that he remembered on the Tennessee River.
The catfish restaurant.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and he told us, he said,
Right.
now,
It's Tennessee River
he says,
catfish.
Steve, he says, this place, they catch the fish right out of the Tennessee River. And he said, and when
Best
you're eating,
catfish in the world.
yes, that's good.
Almost as good as Cross Lake catfish.
Yeah, which we tried
He says,
later
but
too.
he says, you gotta be able to taste the mud.
Roly poly, eating corn and taters, hungry every minute of the day. Roly poly, gnawing on a biscuit, long as he can chew it.
gets time to go out to pay, and we go up to the counter, and Doc is standing right beside me, so I engaged the guy behind the counter in a conversation. I said, now, the catfish that you serve here, I understand, come right out of the Tennessee River. And the guy says, oh no, sir. He said, the fish we have come from a concrete tank in Alabama, and they ship them up here. And Dr. McWhiney doesn't say a thing. He just heads for the car.
Well, also, there was one time when we took one of those trips down to South Louisiana, and we said, let's go get some Cajun seafood. Cajun seafood's the best seafood. It's wonderful seafood. So he got some crab meat and said, my God, this is spicy. He said, it's Cajun food. He said, when I was young, Cajun food wasn't spicy.
He was always the quintessential gentleman. And he told me that I was getting fat and needed to shape up the best anybody's ever told me. He said, Rusty, my boy. He said, you are beginning to assume the girth of a barrister.
Started, well, I'll never forget just looking around the table, and there's Don, there's Bob, there's this physician. I'm looking at the physician particularly.
And there's the angel of death over there.
But I looked at Grady, and Grady just raised his eyebrow at me like, will you shut the hell up? This is, it's not your turn. And I'm like, and I almost died in a history seminar, but
Doc didn't miss a beat.
Doc just kept on going. Okay, that was fine. Okay, next book. What have you read?
Not the first graduate student that's died on me.
And I'm glad that you survived it.
Yeah,
it would have been a really tough night.
We'd have never gotten to your book. And it was always about restaurants and fresh foods and real butter. Gotta have real butter. I remember when he moved to Abilene, there wasn't a restaurant in Abilene that used real butter. If it hadn't come out of a vat in Beaumont, they weren't going to serve it to you. And so,
I thought it was a British Petroleum.
Yeah, but it's a beef grease product. Yeah, it's all green. But I went to all these restaurants in Abilene and actually said, all right, now if I bring a stick of butter with me, can we serve it? And they said, yeah, you're a little odd, but whatever, man. And so I remember actually having my own personal stash of butter so the doc would have one less thing to bitch about when we had
This is the problem. I'm the only one who hasn't been drinking. All the rest of these guys are drunk.
No,
I'm perfectly sober.
You're the only one that hasn't been drinking manly drinks. Doc wouldn't be caught dead drinking gin or alive, and because it's an English drink, of course. Drambuie is for Steve Harden because, well, he's a girl. This is his favorite single malt because it's Dalwhinnie. And Dalwhinnie, of course, is the gathering place of the Clan Winnie, of which he was a member. So, it may taste like absolute, frozen horse excrement, but he'd drink it because it has his name on it. Crown Royal, he wouldn't touch. Well, he was all right with that, but that's a blended whiskey, Don. Vodka, he couldn't pronounce it. Dewar's too cheap. Now he liked this, but he doesn't like Tennessee bourbon. But he loved this. Now he liked this over, what's the other Irish whiskey that's from Northern Ireland? Bushnell's. Yeah, he was always a raging debate over Jameson's or Bushnell's. Bushmills.
Bushmills is scope.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, he didn't like those either. But they both go better with whiskey, it turns out. So he liked this because it was genuine Irish instead of those Orangemen up north. Maker's Mark because it's a good Nelson County, Kentucky bourbon. And the best bourbon on earth comes from Nelson County, Kentucky.
We would go to some of these parties with I could tell some of the faculty that he didn't really like, there in the room and stuff. And
Doc didn't like faculty.
and so he would say, we would be talking about the rubble. Yeah, and he said, well, Rusty, it's this. And then he'd ply me with Evan Williams. Of course, I've told this story earlier tonight. I mean, he's the one that, for good or bad, introduced me to Evan Williams. He said the best whiskey comes from Bardstown, Kentucky, Nelson County, you know.
That's right.
And so after I got plied with a little bit of that, I said, Rusty, let's try the Rebel Yellow. This is what, yeah, you know, or whatever. And I don't think I've done that since college.
Bastards! Right over there across the street, they don't even give us a parking space. Some of us are entitled to that. It's more of an endowed stool than an endowed chair.
His picture on the back of the book, that green book, Cracker Culture. I've got the paperback with his, and he's got this mischievous grin on it. And that is him. That is him.
We were at the Galt house, and we were coming out of the parking garage and going to Doc's car, and some goofball from Kansas had parked too close to him. He said, "Well, I'm just going to show him," and he whipped out his keys and I was stunned.
Shame, shame on you. Shame, shame on you. Took my car and my money, done me wrong, and that ain't funny. Woe is me. Shame on you.
I'm sure.
Had a really mean streak.
Well, I asked him one time, I said, "Doc, you kind of strike me as being kind of a hooligan." And I asked him one time, I said, "Doc, what's the hardest thing you ever hit anybody with?" And he got real contemplative. Thought about it. I think it was a rubber hose with sand in it.
If you went to a conference with Grady McWhiney, even if you were a first-year graduate student,
He treated you like a colleague.
he treated you like a colleague. People would come up and they would try to play that game, and Doc wouldn't let him. He would stop and he'd turn and he'd grab and he said, "Let me introduce you to my student, Steve Harden. Let me introduce you to my student, whomever." And when you're 20, 21 years old and just fresh out of college and you're there and suddenly Grady McWhiney's introducing you as his student, there's a level of pride there.
It was late one day, and I was exhausted and feeling sorry for myself, and I turned to Doc and I said, "Dr. McWhiney, does it get any better when you have your union card?" And he looked at me. There was this long pause, and he said, "Steve, not if you're doing the job like you're supposed to."
And I owe so much because he made me proud to be a Southerner and my heritage, and I'll always remember that. In the course, too, he gave me a great way of life too. Him and Dr. McDonald, they got me into law school, and they helped me get the job I've got now as an assistant United States attorney.
Folks, we'd like to do a special tune now for Mr. McWhiney, and we understand this was his favorite song, and we'd like to play it for you now. And this one's called the Tennessee Waltz.
Loved his students. He took such pride in them. He worried about them. He worried about their dissertations, about getting jobs. And he had such pride in every one of his students. And I know his students had such deep admiration and love for Grady.
The thing about Grady that was so wonderful was that he took us seriously. He took me seriously. He didn't treat me as a dilettante. He knew that I had a passion for this subject, and I wanted a chance to be able to learn from him.
An incredibly committed teacher, a very gracious gentleman, and an incredibly sharp intellect.
The thing about Doc, though, is, he was my friend, and I was his friend, and that's the way all of you guys were. We were all his friends. Doc ended up giving me was a great life. you gave me a band of brothers.
Many say that Doc has retired from the field. Don't believe them. How could he? So long as his book survives, the timbre of his voice will ring in the minds of his readers. As long as his students pass along what he taught them, he remains a force in the profession. Whenever one of us publishes a new book, it is as much his as ours. Every time we draw strength and wisdom from his example, he remains as vital and prominent as ever he was. As long as his kids continue to learn, teach, and write, Doc will impart his vigor to our lives and the lives of our students. But perhaps with the passage of time, Doc's influence will fade. When the Mississippi no longer flows into the sea, when the hearts of Southern boys no longer race to the hunt, when pride and honor cease to figure into the Southern character, that day may come. But I'm not holding my breath.